All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Coach Reese and Coach Loretta here with Coach Kaleb on Coffee with Coaches. So I got some coffee here. I just got back from a nice long run, feeling pretty good. Worked on some of my athletes' logs and just living it up with the sunshine that we haven't seen here in the past like 2 weeks. So feels pretty good. Hope nice and crispy clear with the sunshine. But welcome. We're going to talk with Coach Kaleb about Cocodona 250, about balancing life with work obligations, wanting to excel in your career, still having time to sleep, relax, fulfill social obligations and all of that while gearing up for these massive goals. 100-milers are, pretty daunting for most people to think about, but Cocodona 250 is 250 beautiful miles all around Arizona. So I'd love to hear his take and his experience on his training leading up to this point. So I guess first question to start, Coach Loretta, Coach Kaleb, how are you both doing? Kaleb, you can start.
Yeah, everything is going great. Training's been going really well. This is my first winter not in a snowy climate. So being in Arizona has been really, really cool to be able to get some training mileage in. And I've got a race this weekend too, or next weekend, Black Canyon. So that's been fun to prep for that as well. But everything is going well, and yeah, it's been a good start to the year.
Hey,
Beautiful.
that's awesome. That's awesome. And you're getting lots of vitamin D there in that sun.
Yeah.
I don't have any sun out my window, you guys. Send me some of the sun. There's none here in Michigan. So yeah, so I'm doing pretty good too. Easing into getting ready for the Raven 24 hour, which is February 17th in South Carolina, and super excited about that. I'll be staying a few days on the beach, so maybe I'll get some sun there.
Beautiful. Loretta, can we remind the listeners too who puts on the Raven?
Oh, for sure. So Coach Jacob Moss is the race director with his wife, Riley, and they put on the Raven 24 hour and the Midnight Dreary 24 hour. So looks like there's going to be some great competition on the track. I think there's at least 18 people going for the USA 24-hour team. Some really great competition. So it should be a really fun day on the track. And it's supposed to be like this perfect track with nice and cushy and some shade along the way.
Beautiful. Thanks. I to remind the listeners too that not last week, the week before, we had Jacob Moss on our podcast and we talked all things Raven and his training. So if anybody wants to go back and listen to that one, it is a gem. So Kaleb, I guess to start, thinking about, Black Canyon coming up, you're running the 100K, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Beautiful. So you have that, and then you have Cocodona. Can you kind of run us through like what is going on in your mind when you think about having a 100K and then leading up into a 250-mile? Like, talk through us like training that you've been doing, how you're thinking about leading up, and how you're planning on like succeeding at your ultimate goal, which is excelling at the 250.
Do we really want to know what's going on in his head?
Yeah, I don't think that's where my head was too. I'm like, I don't know if anybody needs to know that. Um, yeah, no, it's been, when I think about the 250, the biggest thing for me, like, yeah, it's going to be super physical, but I am excited for that mental aspect of it. I think that's the biggest draw for me. That adventure piece, like it's the first, I think like 37 or 38 miles are a real bear from everything that I've read and watched. And so it really kind of kicks you in the butt right off the get-go. It's like 10,000 feet of climbing. I don't think there's an aid station until like mile 38 or something. So you go out with like 4 or 5 liters of water. And so it's going to be a grind. And then it's that unknown of what happens at mile 101, right? Because I've done multiple 100-milers, but then what's it going to be like when I'm at mile 100 and I think I need to do that one and a half more times, which is going to be crazy. So it's been a lot for me of just like, how do I build in some of that like mental stress? I know I'm not going to be able to run for 250 miles. So how do I build in like really good hiking capabilities? How do I try to perform well on low rest? What does that look like? And how do I think about this like journey outside of just a race, but like more of like an exploration, right? Like that's what I'm really excited about too. And so I've had the goal of running Cocodona for a couple of years now, really like honestly, probably around the time I ran my first 50K. Like it was right around that time period when Cocodona first got started, and watching the videos and thinking like those people are absolutely crazy. Like I don't know, I can't imagine doing that. And then you start to watch, I would watch more and more, and it was just like, what a cool challenge that would be. Like, and so everything I've done really for like the last like year has been aimed at trying to convince myself that I can take on this challenge. So different races that I've ran, Javelina was a stab at that. Even like last year, early in the year, Crazy Desert 100K in Texas was another stab at that. That was my first desert running experience. And then I've got a series of races. Black Canyon, I signed up for that, about a year ago, and it was that same goal. Like I didn't know if I was going to be able to do Cocodona in 24, but I thought if I can land a big race early in the year, get more desert experience on similar trails to what Cocodona will be like, um, at least I'm preparing myself through races. And so I've got a number of different races lined up. I've got Black Canyon, 100K. I have Crown King Scramble, 50K, and then I have Whiskey Basin 91K. All of those take place on different parts of the Cocodona course. So I've got a race in February, March, and April, which will feed me up through large sections of the course. And then I'm doing a April training run on that first section of the course as well, which is that first 37. So, I'm just trying to do everything I can so that I know when like my body starts to break down, it becomes this like, hey, at least I know this course. Like I've seen it before. I know what it's like, and just try to have like those little mental rewards or like things where you get to certain points on the course and you're like, I remember I ran this once and I had a fun time that day. Maybe not right now, but I had a joyful moment here at one point in time. So that's how I'm trying to approach it. It is daunting. I try to break it up into small pieces when I think about it, and it's going to be here before I know it. But yeah, I'm really excited. It's going to be fun.
I just want to highlight a couple things that I really like that you mentioned, and I'm always a fan of this, is being a student of the sport. And I think that you have goals of, doing your course homework and going and watching a Cocodona videos. And there's even like all the archives of the live streams for like other people that are going to be doing other 200 milers. Like you can find great course recce or like recon or beta on your course just from YouTube or from other write-ups. Everybody's always writing about their experiences. So just gathering this collection of like, okay, I've never done the course, but maybe I can build this bigger picture of what it's going to be like is huge. And then to add to that, now that you have this like established base of like what you see and what you read about the course, now you're putting that into practice and saying, okay, let's go project some of the sections. And I think that's amazing. I think for anybody out there that's trying to like obtain a big goal, just like any goal in life, is like splitting it into smaller chunks and then involved with those. So I just want to applaud you on that. I mean, I think that's a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. And then, okay, so you mentioned now you have a couple races leading up into it. How are you going to take those races? Are those like, are they training races? Are they races that you're specifically planning for? Or are they just for the goal of Cocodona 250?
Jeez. Some of them were signed up for as training races. I have a very difficult time running anything as a training race. Like it's going to be hard. Black Canyon, I won a PR. So that one is going to be like, that's a race. We'll see what definitely Whiskey Basin looks like. That's a 91K and that's in April. That may end up being more of like a training run. I have not done a 50K in quite a while. Like I don't think I ran a 50K last year. I think it's been 2 years. So that one in March may turn into a race for me as well. There's a lot of good climbing in that, which is going to be good. So I think that'll really test me and give me some really good feedback on where I am physically and what my fitness levels are at that one. So that one will probably be a race. And then my guess is Whiskey Basin won't, because I'll have kind of the double up of the first like 37-mile training run in April. I'll also have Whiskey Basin, which is, 91K. So there's going to be a lot in there. Like I don't really want that to be a heavy like race month per se or like push pace. It's going to be more about like how many hours can I get in per week, especially in April. So that'll likely be more my focus, but the first two I will probably race. Yeah.
Oh, great. And so you mentioned increasing like some volume too. So how does that wrap into like your overall life? Because like we want to talk about like, yeah, like if we were just professional athletes or had all of this just to run, like, oh, it sounds like a great plan. But like, what does that look like in your day to day now? Like you're planning, like maybe right now you're not in like a high volume phase. Maybe it's just kind of like status quo. But what are you thinking? What kind of habits are going to be changing as the miles ramp up?
Yeah. Yeah, and man, like one of the hardest things too is it's not just the miles like I'm finding. Like I'm trying to do a lot more climbing as well. I'm trying to get like more mountain legs. And so like that comes at a price of a lot more time per mile. And so like it's like I'm building this mileage, but also because the climbing's growing so much, it's like my total time is like doubling, right? And that's just a rough number, but it's like, holy cow, like there's a lot here. Like I can go run flats and I can increase that mileage at a minimal cost from like a pure time perspective. But as you add in more of this, or I talked earlier about like wanting to be a really good hiker. When I do that, that's even slower, right? Or rucking and that kind of stuff. So that has actually been a challenge for me of figuring out what that balance looks like. Like it's been tough. Because if trying to squeeze in 2 or 3 hours during the week of training, I drive 45 minutes each way to work. And so then you've got like that commute, plus you have like the workday sandwiched in the middle of it. It's turning into a lot of early mornings, like 4:30 a.m. mornings, and then evening runs after I get home. And then I'm fortunate in that we have a good gym here at work that I can utilize, which is great. As well as I can go step out and go for like lunch runs and things like that. So it's been a lot of kind of taking the strategy that I had for Javelina of like breaking runs up because that was difficult to get some of those in, but now even more so. So it's a lot of like, hey, can I go get a climbing workout in the morning before work on trails, run flats at lunch, and then run flats when I get home to get a little bit more time in, that kind of stuff. So it's like the crazy thing is like there's kind of this constant weight on your shoulders with a race like this. And I'm sure you guys have experienced it with your 100-mile training too. Like you guys are out there trying to like really push that pace, like you're trying to win those races, like similar. I'm sure it's that constant, like, what am I doing right now to prepare for it? And when it's always there, even if it's like, I just need to get like 4 or 5 more miles in tonight, right? You still like, that's easy in regards to just running it, but it's that weight that it puts on you mentally all throughout the day, knowing that you still need to, even if you've already completed a big workout or two big workouts, you still have that like third one there. And it's the stress of like, it's there all the time. And so that I think has been the biggest challenge for me is like, how do you deal with that? Because no matter what you're doing, you're constantly thinking about that race. And so that's been a unique challenge for me. You don't really have as many off days or off times, which is tough.
Yeah, I like that you say that. And I think that also when we think about a lot of the people that we're coaching also have kids. So now
Yeah.
they're working, doing the work that you're doing and have kids that may be in sports or maybe they're little ones that they have to care for. And so it's all about that balance, right? And I love it that you're doing 2 and 3 a days. That's similar way that I am training actually as I'm building up to the 24-hour race. Because I find that it's really helpful with my recovery. I can get in a little bit more miles. It's easier for me to build up my volume by breaking them down into a few times a day. But you're right, you're always working your life around those segments of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. Like it's easier to kind of go out. I don't know if it's easier. It's mentally easier to go out and run 20 miles all at once and then know that you're done for the day. It's almost harder to break that 20 miles up into three just because it's just there. It's like a sandbag around your shoulders all day, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting, like that, the passion paradox of, like we want to excel at these things, but how do we make sure that our training is like beneficial and not like crushing us? Like it's okay to have like a little bit of weight on your shoulders because it like gets your butt up, at 4:30 to like motivate you to go. But it can't be so much weight that it's just like I'm burning myself out, And I think one
Mhm.
of you considered this is like counting total number of hours. Like I think of like as like, collecting heartbeats. So it's like you know, as I was coming back from injury, before Frozen Gnome and like during Frozen Gnome, it's like I was only running like 30 or 40 miles for the week, but I was getting like 15 hours of aerobic activity with the trainer bike that we have. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, and I look at my Strava, oh yeah, like lower mileage, but then like I see my overall volume and I'm like, oh, that's cool. So like, do you envision yourself like, okay, like I'm gonna get like a couple hours worth of hiking in, I'm gonna get like a couple hours worth of running in, and then all the other cross training and strength training that you're doing, or like how does all of like blend into your construction when you're planning your own training?
Yeah, definitely. Like I would like to my from what I've read, I mean, you look at like the elites that are winning Cocodona and these 200 milers, a lot of them aren't even doing like 100-mile weeks. A lot of them are doing like 80 to 90 miles a week. That's peak week. And then they're flexing in. Some of them are doing like the ski cross training, stuff like that, the weight training, other things. But like we're not talking like when I first started looking at this, it was like, gosh, I need to do like 150 miles a week or something, right? Like, and it's not true. So it is that total time. My goal is probably going to be to cap out right around like 85, 90 a week and be able to hold that for several weeks, like in my peak phase of this, while also probably doing a few hours, like maybe 3 to 5 hours of hiking per week, and some of that's going to be rucking included in there. And then outside things, more of the cross training and whatnot. But like when I think about just like walking and moving or running, like it's probably going to land me somewhere in that like 20 hours would be like my peak probably per week, that would be allocated towards that type of movement. Yeah.
Got to make it a little bit easier to think too, like, okay, I have 20 hours, so like how do I distribute them per day? Like maybe I have like hours worth of like commute and work Monday through Friday, you know, so then like how much can I get in while not sacrificing too much on sleep or like food prep or family obligations too. So sometimes that like it's mentally easier to think about time investments, you know.
Yeah, I like that. And that's, how I work with my athletes is like thinking about, okay, how much time do you realistically have in a week that you can dedicate to training? And then let's take that amount because consistency is key. We all know that, right? So then we can take that amount and we can figure out how it can work into your schedule because sometimes I get people, they come in and they're like overzealous. They're really excited because they got these big goals and they want to do all of this stuff. But when you really look at, okay, how much time do I have in a week that I can spend and how can I use that time as best as I can, right? And use every minute of that time to get me towards the goal. And like, I think some of the things you're doing, like that race specificity is really, really key, right? Working on that climbing, that's going to be huge, spending time on your feet. I also think about like jobs and what jobs people are doing. Some people have really active jobs. Some people have jobs where they're sitting. And I think that also makes a difference when we're thinking about time on feet and how much time are you spending on your feet every day. Kaleb, do you move around a lot during the day? Are you at a desk most of the day?
Yeah, it kind of depends what's going on. I mean, I have a standing desk, so even if I am here, I can do that, right? And I can get that time on feet. I've candidly, like I've looked at also getting those treadmill, like you can get them on Amazon to put under your desk and just be able to get, if I could get like an hour or two of walking on the days where I have a lot of meetings and I'm at my desk, like chained to my desk all day, like being able to do that would be great too. So I looked at that as well. There's some pretty affordable options out there online that you can get. So that was another thing I have thought about. And then that helps me, right? It's like, how do you accomplish and like as runners like we're wired this way, but it's like opening like another curtain here for me as I get into this. It's like how can I knock out multiple things at once? And running and doing anything else seems like I can only run during that time, but it's like, well, what if I could walk in and take meetings, right? Like then I've just saved myself like 2 hours throughout the day. And it's like wins like that, or like even in daily life, like opportunities where I can combine two things at once to get that like that benefit of that time. And it's just those like small wins that I'm starting to find. Not there yet, still looking for as many of those as I can get over the next few months. But those are the types of things that I'm really starting to learn. And yeah, if I could do more of that at work, it would be fantastic. So that's where my head is too, Loretta.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, anything we can do to multitask. When I used to work in the office, I had a kettlebell under my desk. And when I had a minute, I would be doing kettlebell swings or goblet squats or, something. So I felt like I was, moving towards my goal throughout the day when I had a 5 second, of time here or there. Recently, I just posted on Facebook, one of my athletes has 4 small children and she's training for big races too. And so it's a really cute video or reel if you haven't seen it. She's actually doing some squats, some thrusters, and some overhead press with her baby who weighs about 22 pounds. And so she's getting playtime with her baby. They're having fun. He's enjoying it, but she's also getting her strength training in. So she's able to blend that. And I have a few other moms that do that same thing, or people that are working as maybe nurses and midday have a second to do some squats. They're doing squats, while they're standing and waiting for something. So I think that there's ways that you can get in little pieces of stuff, blend it in through your day, and kind of make it part of making it functional, part of your daily routine rather than having to do something in addition to your daily routine.
Yeah.
First thing, I'm a huge fan of the bike trainer for this multitasking purpose. For anybody that knows me, so like my girlfriend and I invested in a bike trainer for Christmas, and like there's been a couple Sundays where I'm on it for like 2 hours in the afternoon after like getting all my chores done, went for a morning run with a couple friends, and it's like, oh, I got some time to kill like watching TV. Well, I can watch TV and also be pedaling nice and light and putting my heart rate in like 120 beats per minute. I can call my mom and say, hey, how are you doing? She doesn't know I'm on the bike trainer. You can like modify your effort really well that way. Plus it's like noise resistant. So, or not noise resistant, it doesn't make any noise. So I think it's a great tool for everybody. Like I'm just becoming more and more of a fan of it as the days go on, to just like make your downtime or make your TV time. Like if you need the recovery time, you need the recovery time by all means. But sometimes like, if I'm just going to be like watching a show, like I can watch a show and be moving my legs nice and light too. And oftentimes, like I'll get done with that and I'll feel really good afterwards. So, yeah, just to play along to that, I think it's great thinking our training, not just in terms of like running miles or even hours, but just like how active are you during the day, anyways? Because Kaleb, for you at a 250, you're going to be active for multiple days in a row, almost nonstop, depending, which we should probably talk about in a little bit. But the second thing is that I really like that you brought up that like just because we're doing these longer races doesn't mean that like our training needs to jump up a lot, right? Like we talk marathon training and like 100-mile training is it's like, well, if you've built yourself up to a marathon, like chances are you don't need to put any more miles in. You could, that will definitely benefit you. But in order to complete the 100-mile distance, then it becomes more like skills. It becomes more specificity. Like if there's hills, like marathon runners aren't used to hiking. We hear this all the time. Like runners, go into a trail race and they're like, oh my God, I felt like if I stopped and I hiked, like that was basically like, I was cheating the race because I wasn't running. So it becomes less about just more, and more about like, okay, how do I simulate what it's going to be like when I'm forced to be hiking for the first 30 miles when I feel fresh and I'm going to be gaining 30,000 foot or 10,000 foot of elevation, right? What is it going to feel like? And how do I mimic the fatigue that I'm going to experience when I'm like 150 or 200 miles into it? And I think that's when like, instead of doing more of just running, we can start to build in like the strength training, the daily, kind of like we were talking about before. So I guess two things that I definitely want to touch on while we got you on the phone is like strength training. Like you're going to be, like you said, you're going to be carrying 4 liters of water at the start, right?
Yeah.
So you don't just need legs for that. You need a body, you can't all legs and or all lungs and legs. Like you got to have some shoulder strength, but then also too, since we're talking about race strategy and what you're going to be dealing with, I think one of the big things, like we mentioned before, was the sleep piece. Everybody's got their own strategy, not a lot of research in there. So how are you like, strategizing your sleep, and how are you taking your strength training?
Yeah, I've incorporated a lot of rucking has been a big part of it, of trying to simulate like I really want to get comfortable with like 30 plus pounds on my back and going up and doing big climbs and big hikes through the desert where there's tripping hazards all over and that kind of stuff. Like that's probably been the biggest piece that I've incorporated, because if I can get used to doing that and navigating that with like 30, 35 pounds on my back, and I can do that after I've done these big runs, or I can do it after I've done big climbs, like even if my pack weighs 15 pounds when I'm running, or when I have that, I'm gonna be used to that. It's gonna feel lighter. And to your point, like, yeah, I mean, my shoulders and my rotator cuffs and everything like hurts after those rucks, right? Like it's tough. And I do need to start incorporating more of the strength piece, like just in the gym for sure. Like that's an area that needs to improve for me too. It's all been more of like that functional out on the trail, like how do I do that kind of stuff right now? But there's definitely more that I can introduce, and that will be a part as I move forward of working through that and continuing to build in all phases. From the sleeping perspective, I have some ideas of how I'm going to navigate that. I haven't had to do it yet. One of the things that I've done in the past, and I did this before Hennepin the first time, is the 4x48 challenge, or the David Goggins type challenge, right? Where you are waking yourself up throughout the night to go into your runs. So if you're not familiar, it's where you run 4 miles every 4 hours for a 48-hour window. I may extend that as well and try to do it a little bit longer, because you definitely do get that fatigue factor in there. That'll be probably something that I'll do one of the weekends at least, in my work up to that. Some other stuff that I've read and learned through some research is like going out and running like a 50K training run kind of in the middle of the night, and then going and taking a 45-minute nap, and then going and doing another training run after can help simulate that throughout the weekends too. So you could do that piece. What I've thought personally, and I haven't done this, and I don't know for sure that I will, would be, so definitely doing that strategy, but back to like more that Goggins approach of being able to do that throughout the week, and being able to have to come and still work during that time too, right? So like I've always thought about doing that on the weekends, but that makes it easier. So what if I do it during the week? And what if I can carve out in my schedule where I run right before I come into work, I run at lunch, and then I run when my day is over, and then I'm doing that throughout the night too, so I'm getting minimal sleep throughout the week, and then see how I can function in that realm. We'll see what that looks like. And part of the reason why I would like to try that, you have to get really good at like micro napping too, and being able to do like 20 minutes of rest or 45 minutes of rest. I have been listening to some podcasts though that have talked about the benefits of doing like a 2 or 3 hour like actual real nap during a race like that, and then comparing some of the results from folks that have done that or that have started to do that versus the little micro naps on the trail or in the back of the van. And from the stuff that I've read, it seems like that's maybe more effective. But that's not been like the tried and true strategy that people have been doing in the 200 milers really for the, like, since these have become a thing in the last like few years. So I'll continue to research that. I don't know 100% what that race day strategy looks like, but that's why it's going to be important to test during training
Sure.
for
You know,
me, because I think it's different for everybody.
yeah, I've coached a couple people to 200-mile finishes, and they're, the approach has been different with both of them because they're both, different people. And so I think it's really good that you're thinking about it and testing it for yourself. Sure, you can read what other people are doing, but that might not be right for you.
Right.
So I had one athlete that I coached that she was breaking her runs up and doing them a few times a day. And that's the way it worked. Plus she had 5 kids and she worked full time, so she had to be able to break some of it up and do some of it on the treadmill because that's, when her kids were taking a nap or, whatever. And I think so for her that worked. She did a lot of, she lives a flatlander, didn't have the experience you have that's, actually out in the same terrain. So she was doing a lot of power hiking on the treadmill, which also was a huge help for her. And we did a lot of focus on single leg strength and heavy strength as well to get her prepared to withstand 200 miles. One of the things that she had as a takeaway afterwards was she got too sleep deprived. She should have taken more time early on and slept rather than waiting. And she felt like she just waited too long. And, there's that point, right? Of if you wait too long, then can you sleep, and then you're getting to the hallucination piece and, all of that. My other athlete, she, preferred doing more longer efforts, back-to-back type stuff on the weekends to get hers in. She also incorporated more heavy strength type workouts as well. And her sleep started she went in with a solid plan and, tried to go through the same sleep plan for the whole, entire thing. So yeah, so I think it's individual and testing it. And I think there's a lot of ways to approach finishing a 200-mile race, same as a 100-mile race. There's just so many ways you can do it. There's no like one right or wrong way, I think.
I just want to mention. Oh, I'm sorry. Go for it, Caleb.
Just like it's also no matter what plan you have going into it, it's not going to be the same plan that you have in the middle of it or at the end of it. Like
Right.
there's so many variables in a race like this, like it's impossible. And I think like, when I think about what I do for a living, it's like how do you adapt to like I'm in supply chain and engineering and logistics and that kind of stuff. Like that's been my whole career. And it's like, how do you deal with things when they catch on fire? Like that's what I do as a living. And it's like that taking that strategy into the race environment of like it's gonna hit the fan. But how am I prepared so I have multiple tools in my tool chest to whip them out when that happens to be able to address it?
Yeah. And I think that's super key is just expecting the unexpected, right? We have to have adaptability out there on these long efforts because like you said, we can't predict what all is going to happen that day or over the course of now you have more than just one day, 2 or 3 days, 4 days, whatever. And so you really have to be able to be adaptable and roll with those punches because that's what's going to break you down. If you can't do that and you freeze or freak out, that's going to take a lot of energy. So thinking about how am I going to get that through? I mean, I think that's a good piece of earlier Reese mentioned, using the videos people are showing online. And one of the things I like to do in preparing for a race is watching the race video and thinking about, okay, how do I feel right now? And like, okay, I'm having a really good race, but then also thinking about, okay, now I feel really cruddy. How am I going to get myself out of this place? And I like to kind of mentally walk myself through that. And then I also know from experiences when I'm really starting to feel cruddy, it's probably nutrition and hydration, so experiencing that on some of your longer efforts is going to be helpful and being able to keep that, I think, balanced, throughout the entire event and keeping you balanced rather than having big high spikes and low spikes because of a nutrition or hydration issue, because that's another whole thing, right? In these hundreds, most of them have been under 24 hours, right? So you haven't experienced past that. So thinking about your fueling, I mean, in 100 personally myself, I kind of have a plan where the first 50 is a certain way I'm feeling. And the second 50, I feel a little bit differently. How are you thinking about fueling for, so many hours?
It's concerning. It is like, it's concerning. I it's been like that's been one of the biggest struggles for me in this training, like seriously, because I am used to my training load. I entered this ultra space like 2 years ago, and it's been this progression of learning and learning and learning. And I got to this point where I was like, for javelina training and whatnot, like I was really locked in and I knew what I needed to eat and how much I needed to eat all through training and everything. And it was like, oh, I've really kind of figured this out. And now, like, as everything is exponentially growing, it's unbelievable to me how much food I need to eat and being able to stay on top of it just in training. And I know that it's going to be the same thing during race day. And, I've put a lot of work into figuring out that nutrition plan for myself in these races leading up to this. But now it's just like, holy cow, I feel like I'm like doubling my consumption because like on the weekends, like when I'm going and doing these big climbing workouts and things, like I'm burning like 5,000 calories in a day, and it's just insane. Like it's crazy, and just being able to refuel that, knowing that like, hey, tomorrow or today I had a long run, tomorrow I have a big climbing workout, and all of a sudden it just snowballs that calorie consumption, and you're like, I thought I ate a lot, and I did, but I didn't eat enough. And so that's been really, really hard. And I'm trying to figure that out in the training piece, and then the racing piece. I'm going to map out the plan of what that needs to look like in terms of, sodium intake and calories and carbs and everything throughout that race. And like we talked about earlier, it's going to be a plan that's going to have to change multiple times during the race, but that's going to be where it's really important for my crew too. Like I need my crew I need them to be able to hold me accountable to that. Cause it's going to get to a point where I'm like, I'm going to be gone, and I need them to be able to look at my plan, to be able to understand my approach, to be able to understand how I wanted to handle my sleep schedule and what my alternatives were there. And then I need them to help coach me through that when I'm not able to help guide myself. And so I'll have the food options ready. I'll have it mapped out, so they know that. I'll know what I want that sleep schedule to look like and sodium and everything. But I need them to be able to manage that with me and then guide me through it when I can't do it myself.
Right. Well, if Caleb's crew is listening right now, here's a tip. Watch out. He's going to start packing that thing full
Yeah.
more than he'll ever need.
Yeah.
Calm him down.
Yes.
And don't
Force
take
me
the
to eat it.
headphones.
Yes. Yes.
Back up and mention sleep is a lot like training for sleep is a lot like training for hydration, where like you can't dehydrate yourself to the point where water, right? Like there's no physiologic adaptation to starving yourself of water and then just never having to drink again. Like you have to drink. So you get to this point where if you deprive yourself of water, eventually to the point it's gonna, have negative health consequences and you're not gonna bounce back from it. A lot like sleep, where you can't not sleep your way into never having to sleep again. Like sleep and water aren't, we just like train, beat up, and then they get stronger. So for people that are out there, the big key piece with sleep is that like and dehydration is you can get psychological benefits of how to cope with the sleeplessness. Just like you can get the psychological benefits of being able to cope with not being fully hydrated. But at some point, like you are going to have to come out of that dehydration, just like you are going to have to come out of that sleep deprivation. So for the listeners out there, I just don't want you to go out and think like, oh, I'm just not going to sleep for a week and like I'll be fine on race day, because then you're going to destroy the rest of your life. And I think that's counterintuitive or counterproductive to the topic that we're talking about of like, yeah, we want to train for our running goals, but we also don't want it to destroy our work life, just like Caleb was talking about, whatever it is. Plus, then you're not going to be recovering from your workout. So I think that's where the science is, like how much and how do we train the psychological skill of sleep deprivation without hindering our workouts and being able to physically prepare for our event, but still get the emotional and the psychological piece of being able to be in a sleep deprived state and still perform. So I like that 4x4x48 challenge where you're giving yourself these microdoses of having to wake up and then get going in the middle of the night and wake up, get going, get back to sleep. One thing that I have used with an athlete before to kind of prime into sleeping is sensory cues. So they've done a lot of studies with smells in Navy SEALs where, like they will give them, they will let them choose whatever smell they want that they find pleasing and relaxing. And then while you're training, you just put it in a diffuser, whenever you go to sleep and you smell this pleasing smell going to sleep. So it kind of primes your brain whenever you smell this smell to lull back into sleep. So I wonder, Caleb, if there's a way that, like maybe we can have some like sensory cues while you're out on the trail, because, like Loretta was saying, like sometimes you don't feel that you're sleepy, even if you've been up for a really long time. So to be able to lay down, have your mind be racing, have your body be kind of shaking because of a hard effort, and just have these cues to just help slip you into this parasympathetic state where you can get some rest, I think is pretty big, because the quicker you can get to rest, the quicker you can get back up and get back on the trail too. That was the point I wanted to bring up before. But the point that I have now currently is, like you're saying with food and with eating, you're not just eating for the race, right? Like when we're running like a 50 or 100 miles, like sure, like we've all heard that like 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates are like around 240 to like 360 calories per hour is going to be like an optimal place to be. But like most of us are going to be burning far past, like that consumption that our stomachs can handle, right? And that's where we come into and we tap into like, stored body fat and things like that to help supplement the energy needs as we're still out on the trail, because our stomach can't process and absorb everything that we need while we're moving at a certain intensity. So I think it's interesting that you bring up that like you're going to be eating a lot on trail, because not only are you eating for the 250 miles that you're going to be moving, but you're eating for that your body just needs that basal metabolic like calorie consumption to be a human being anyways. So I think that's an interesting take on like, yeah, like I'm going to need like X amount of calories per hour, but also add on to that, like a healthy person should just be eating, 1,800 to 3,200 calories per day anyways. So you add those together, is a lot of food. So I'm glad that you brought up that fact too, because when we're racing such long distances, like, like you got to be thinking about your daily consumption as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I like that you both brought up is, the part where we're putting in some heavy training and we're starting to feel fatigue because we're not getting in enough calories in the day. And, thinking about that, I have had that conversation with a few athletes lately who, their volume is going up, but their volume of food intake is not going up. And so they're tired, right? So having conversation about how can you fit in some snacks here and there so that you can, keep your energy levels up throughout the day to maintain the type of training that you're doing. So I think that, and so then it becomes, right, another piece of the whole puzzle, right? Now you're going to work, now you're running, now you're hiking, now you're strength training, now you're eating, like, and in between all of those, it's kind of more like work, eat, run, eat, strength train, eat, it's like eat, and that it takes some planning too, whether it's through food prep or, getting snacks to always have with you, throughout the day to be able to maintain that intake. Because I think a lot of people, I know I'm guilty of this, when I get really in a busy day and I'm working, I forget about, to take that time to
Yeah.
eat. And it becomes so much more important when your volume is increasing to the point where yours is right now, I think.
Yeah, and it's hard too because like you are so much hungrier and then you need those snacks, which means you're going to go to the grocery store more, especially until you understand how many snacks you actually need, right? Like I'll get stuff and then it's gone. Like, and it's like, I didn't get enough, and it's like figuring out that new level because then every time you go to the grocery store, it's like, well, there goes an hour. And when my time is already limited, it's like, I don't know if I can afford an hour. And then you just start, like, for me right now, it's just like you start just grabbing whatever you can find that's not nutritious, that's not helping you in any way. You're still hungry. Um, and so like that's been a real challenge for me. Like I think and that's honestly, listen, like that's one of the things I'm most excited and why I wanted to do this. Cause like I think that I know I'm gonna learn a lot. So like whether Cocodona goes really well or really bad, like the everything I'm gonna learn from this process is gonna be awesome. So like that may be the worst 4 or 5 days of my life. Maybe like who knows? Probably will be until the end, like those stretches. And that's okay because like this is worth it. Like I need to understand like how do you plan all of these different things into your life, and it feels like it's going to be this like superhero power coming out of it, whether it's for a race or just for life in general, of like how do i how do I balance all of this, and like if I can get through this process in life, I know I can get through other things that are going to come up every day. And then just like one other thing off of that, one of the other hardest like parts of this for me so far has been, I know I'm going to be exhausted during the race and I know it's going to be really tough. So now in training, when I'm tired, when I would normally be like, today should be a rest day, right? Like my body's giving me every signal that I need a rest day. You have these thoughts then, and it's kind of that sandbag that I was talking about earlier, where it's like, dude, you're going to be tired on the race. You think you're going to be less tired than you are right now? Like, you better go and do it anyways, so you can practice in these conditions. And that's been something like I didn't anticipate through training, that it's this whole new mental side for me. And I've done 100 milers, but it's like this feels like it's different because you have that, like, multiply that by 2.5 times, and then it takes every excuse out of the book that you could ever have. And trying to be able to have that like natural filtration system in my own head of like, there's some validity to some of that, but there's also like, listen to your darn body, you need a rest day,
Yeah.
period. Like, so that's been a unique thing to have to navigate, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do that.
Well, that's interesting too. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons we coach a lot of athletes, right? Is because they need somebody to help guide them with that, because it's
Mhm.
harder for us to control ourselves than if you have somebody else saying, no, like kind of leading you along the way to help you
Yeah.
realize, oh, I do need a rest day. I need to listen to my body, even though you know all of those things as a coach.
Mhm.
So phone a friend. Reese and I are here.
Yeah.
Text us when you're struggling, and we can help tell you, don't go out today. Take a rest day.
Yes.
Oh, Gil, we'll just tell you.
Part of it is like, so the race ends too. You have to summit Mount Eldon in Flagstaff. So like you're like 230 miles in, and then you have to go up a mountain that sits at like 9,200 feet. So you have to climb that and come down it. When I moved out to Arizona, I went to Eldon. and went up it. Like that was my first thing here. Before I even got to Phoenix, I went straight to Flagstaff and wanted to do the mountain. And it was covered in snow. And that was the same time that I'm going to be going through it for Cocodona this year. And just like that sits in my head because that snow was packed. So it was ice. It was hard for me. I remember being like, and I was fresh. And I remember being like, man, this is tough. Like, this is a tough climb, thin air, ice everywhere. Like, this is really tough. And so now that sits in my head too of like, okay, well, 230, mile 230. And now I have that image there of like what it's going to be like. Um, yeah, I don't know, guys. It's gonna, you may be getting some texts because
Well, we're here.
it's,
We're here to help you.
it's there. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's a good tip. If you don't have a coach of your own though, like have a training partner accountability person that can help,
Yeah.
keep you from yourself, from
Yeah.
making,
Yes.
yeah.
When we talk about fatigue, even for like 100-mile runner, like 100-mile training, is like you think to yourself, like, hey, like, through the night, like I'm gonna just every point that you've just mentioned, right? I think zoom out and say, like, okay, like what week am I in? Like, where am I in my plan? If I'm just at the start and I'm feeling like slammed and wrecked, like take those rest days all you want because we have heavier training that's coming up, right? Like, but if you're like peak volume, like last week, or maybe you have like 1 or 2 push weeks where it's like, okay, this is going to be where the meat and potatoes of this prep is going to be, then you kind of know that like, hey, I'm going to be pushing through some fatigue and just starting to walk that razor's edge, not necessarily of like overtraining or like getting injured, but walking that razor's edge of like, okay, like what is beneficial and what is counterproductive in fatigue, So I think for people that are prepping, just having that zoomed out view to say like, okay, like where am I in the overall build and how does that look like is important. So, and oftentimes I got to remind myself of that is like, there's the why of like, why are you racing? There's the why, like what block are you in? Like, what are these next 4 weeks going to prep you for? There's the why of what is the purpose of this week? And then there's the why of like, why am I out here doing this workout right now? And if you can't answer all of those and say, this is the reason, this is how it builds into a bigger picture, then it's hard to justify it in training. It's kind of like like from the first brush, like you have a plan for what that paint is doing on the canvas. You don't just kind of like, hopefully this picture just makes itself. Like you got to be thinking like this wraps into something larger than just this one day.
And I also think, we have a previous podcast that listeners can go back to when we talk about, are you recovering or are you adapting, and thinking about that too, when you're thinking about how the fatigue is starting to set in, and at what point should you start getting that more fatigue as you're building to a big effort. And, because I think that's a sign of whether you do need more rest or, are you having a good balance?
Coach Kaleb, is there anything else you want to mention, or do you feel like we covered some of these topics sufficiently?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing is just like is finding balance, and if you've got kids, if you have a family, if you have other commitments, like you should map those out before you sign up for the race and make sure that like how does this all connect. I think it's also important, like I don't have those dependents on me right now. Like in regards to like my personal life, it's like this is like my journey and I'm on it and I don't have kids and a family like that. I think if you are in those situations, like you have to weigh that factor of like, do you have the support and the ability to do this stuff too? Cause like it's such a big time commitment, whether it is a 100-miler or a 200-miler, like making sure that you're able to assess the stress levels of all parts of your life and make sure that people are bought in. And like, I even did it with work, like making sure that my place of employment understood like, hey, this is going to be a big time commitment. I'm going to be pretty focused on this. Like, is this okay? Like, this is a big endeavor that I'm about to go on. And what does that look like? So I think you always need to make sure that before you sign up for a big goal, that you have the buy-in of everybody around you that needs to be bought into it. And that can help eliminate that stress, having people like you, Reese, and you, Loretta, that I can reach out to, right, as well, to get that feedback, and making sure that it's like a community around you that's helping, even if they're not there in it with you every single day. But it helps take some of that pressure off that we talked about. So yeah, I'm appreciative for the chance to talk with you guys about this, and hopefully it resonates with some people out there that are navigating through some of these challenges of their own.
Right. That's awesome. And we'll obviously be following you along the way. So definitely have you
Yeah.
back on the show a few more times to talk about your
Yeah.
training, how it's going, and then post race. So it's going to be exciting next few months to follow along. So
Yeah,
you
thank
had
you.
some, I think you posted some question on your social media. Do you want to answer some of
Yeah.
those questions, or we can throw them out?
Yes. Yeah. So the first question that I had gotten was, how do you elicit help from potential pacers? So we can throw that out, kind of each of us, but what does that look like, and how do you get people to be bought in to come and do that, or even crew you?
So
Loretta,
jump. I'm going to start. So I mean, I have my husband, so I'm pretty lucky about that. But I think there are groups that you can, like, usually the race groups, you can throw that out there. Training groups, asking for pacers, I think is good. Talking to your friends. A lot of our friends want to help us. I think sometimes it's more the opposite. We feel bad burdening people by asking them, but they really want to be there and they want to help. So you're not burdening them at all. So they most likely will go. Me and a couple of friends traveled out to Javelina to support a friend. We wanted to be there, so I think that people do, and you don't realize that. There are ways to get pacers, I think. A lot of people do some of these big events without a pacer or with one person as well. So there's different ways, I think, to approach it. But really just putting yourself out there, asking, hey, anybody want to pace me for this? I have this big event and I'm going to need somebody for the last 40 miles, and I think also when you're thinking about getting pacers, some people that maybe don't earn a lot or maybe as fast as you are a little intimidated to pace you. But I always remind people, let's say when we're thinking about 100, if you're getting a pacer at mile 80, you're going to be moving much slower typically at that time, especially, you're finishing your first 100. So you can recruit people that may not be as fast as you on a daily basis. They still can support you, on the race. That's my 2 cents.
Beautiful. Love it. Yeah, I would just say, I've seen a lot of people post on Facebook because like everybody's got a page, and that's usually where you can just throw the line out. Big piece of advice just from personal experience is don't wait until the last minute to do it. Like notice as you possibly can, because say if they got to fly out with you, or if they have to make like training record or training plans of their own just to make sure that they're prepared for what you're asking them to do, like give them a couple months heads up. I mean, it's kind of like wedding planning to a certain degree. Like, you can't just ask people to attend and partake in this huge event to like just at the drop of a dime. So like anybody that's out there right now, like if you're thinking about like a race in June, July, August, like hit up those pages, because once people like and subscribe to them, like you get all the notifications. And if one person in the group doesn't like want to pace, but they know somebody who would, a lot of times you'll get leads that way. So like you got to toss those feelers out soon for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, some people really love pacing and crewing, so they'll be all over that. I have athletes that I've connected with, other athletes that I coach, that have helped to crew them and pace them to races because they love doing it and they just want to support in the community. So there's definitely help out there. You just have to look and not be afraid to ask.
Mm-hmm.
You guys nailed that one. I agree with all of that. And then the last one was so if you have like coming into racing season, if you have like back-to-back races, let's say you have like 3 weeks in between, what are some tips of how to recover quickly? I think like my perspective on that is really like that work ought to be done before you sign up for the races to make sure that you can recover in that. But if you've signed up for 2 and you're like, holy crap, like what do I do? Any tips for that? And race dependent too, distance wise, but that was the question.
Right. I think that's a really good point you make, is you need to like really map out your races for the year, I think. And then think about, is this an A race where I'm going to go all out and give it my all? And this is the one that I'm really focusing on. Is it a B race or is it a C race? Like, how am I going to use that? And then stick to that plan, right? Because what I sometimes see people fall into the trap of, they get into these races we plan, we talk about it. They've picked their A races, their B races, their C races. So when I'm thinking of a C race, it's more of a training run. So it's just going out there with a supported run that day, right? That you would normally be doing by yourself. But some people fall into the trap of racing every race because they get there and they get excited. And then that's where I think we get into trouble of trying to do races back to back like that, because you're not recovered. And the goal was supposed to just be a training run. And so if it was just a training run, you should be able to recover and then go right into that next race. But if you treated them both back to back 3 weeks apart as A races, that's where I think it's, a little bit harder for our bodies to recover. And maybe you're not going to get the goal that you wanted by setting yourself up for that. And then also when you're thinking about just a few weeks apart in a race, of course, the distance matters, right? If we're talking 5Ks or we're talking, 50 miles, 100 miles, it's going to make a little bit difference of what I'm saying, but your work is already done. If it's only 3 weeks apart, it's all about focusing on the recovery coming off that race, right? So getting good sleep, getting good nutrition, taking care of yourself with massage and mobility, all of those pieces that you can now have extra time because you're not probably putting in the volume in between those weeks that you can focus on self-care to get yourself ready for that next event is what I think. And I think that not pushing yourself to go back out too fast, especially if you're finishing a big effort, coming back out too fast is where we start running into all these little niggles that we didn't have before, but it's because our body has been, broken down from that hard effort that we just put, and we need to allow it time to repair before we start pushing ourselves back out there. So that would be my advice. I don't know, Reese, what do you have?
Well, I don't have a lot of experience with this because my personal racing strategy is line up like 1 or 2 heavy races in the year and then maybe have like 1 or 2 supporting races. That kind of bit me last year because I got COVID 3 weeks before tunnel. I missed one of my prep races because of the COVID, and then was hampered at tunnel because of my breathing. So this year I took a little bit different of approach. I wanted to have something to look forward to every month. So we'll see if I eat my words on this one, but this is my right, is Kettle in June is the big race. It's the 100-miler. So everything before that is built up to trying to have my best race there. May, before that, I'm doing the Galena Sky 8-hour. So there's only like 3 to 4 weeks, and I plan on having at least like a week and a half to 2 weeks of solid recovery after Galena, before I come back into like racing Kettle. So there's not a lot of training time there, right? A month before Galena in April, I'm doing Potawatomi 50. I'm treating that as another A race. I definitely want to be competitive at it, but I'm not going to sacrifice everything by all means to try to get there. So with that, I consider having the April and the June really hard races. So basically what I'm doing right now in January, February, and March is building all that fitness for Kettle. And then once Potawatomi comes up, then it's more like, hey, let's race this hard, let's recover. And then with the 1 or 2 weeks that I have before the next race, let's get a little bit more specific. I'm not going to be building any fitness. I'm not going to be doing any hero workouts. I'm not going to be doing any hero mileage. But then it's just about fine tuning, like, hey, like, what does Galena have that Pot didn't have that I need to touch up on before that race? And then same thing after Galena is, what does Kettle have, or what are weaknesses that I find in those other races beforehand to touch up on before I get to Kettle? Now, my personal strategy is I wanted to build a lot of durability this year. So you got to ask yourself, what is my goal? What is the reason why I'm racing all these races? Mine is personally durability. So I wanted to do some longer races. Otherwise, I really wouldn't do the 8-hour at Galena the week before, or the 4 weeks before Kettle. I would do the 4-hour. So I would caution people, if you're going to be stacking races like that and you're going to be trying to recover, make sure that it is a race that you can recover for. If you've never, a 50-miler, then you're probably going to have a lot of recovery time. But as the anecdotes go, we've heard a lot of people say like, oh yeah, after a few X distance races, I've noticed myself being better able to rebound from those, right? So for somebody who's just getting into ultra running, they might look at my schedule and be like, dude, you're not going to be able to bounce back. And I will in turn then say, it comes down to how prepared I am the months beforehand, building the fitness, and then how I execute the races and the distance of those races and my training history for the past 10 years I've been in the sport leading up to this point. So I would ask an athlete before I would say, hey, like, this is a good idea or this is not a good idea. something that you really got to suss out. It's not just the race that you're running. It's not just the recovery or the extra protein shake. It's all those other factors. Why are you doing it? What's your training history? Do you feasibly think that you can like take the race with the intention of using it as a training race? Or do you know you're like Kaleb mentioned before, and I'm very much so like this, where I have a hard time using a race as a training race because I just want to like, you know, when the sounds are going, the horns are blasting, like I want to rip, you know? So yeah, I guess I'm kind of getting lost in my own words right now, but to the original question, that's what I would advise is just look at you as an athlete and be honest with yourself and think, am I capable of executing the race that is going to build into this larger picture? And then what is your larger picture?
Awesome.
So many great nuggets in there. And I like the part that you
Yeah.
threw in, you know, also depends on your experience level, right? The more that we have experience with running and these ultra distances, our body is making a lot of adaptations. And so when we get into these bigger events, we are able to recover faster because our body has adapted. I think another big piece is maintaining good nutrition and hydration in that race is going to help make a difference in how quickly you recover. If you really get into a race where you get super depleted on calories or on electrolytes or hydration, you're going to have a harder time recovering after that race.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah,
huge.
and I think sometimes you can get lost in like the recovery is just like laying on the couch, which like good luck bouncing back if that's what all that it looks like. Like you got to move a little bit. We've got to do some stuff in here to get the blood flowing and all that kind of stuff, right? So like having that plan before the race so that after, if you're just exhausted, you're like, oh, I was supposed to do like a 30-minute walk today. I don't know, whatever it is, right? Just like having some of that outlined in advance. So when you have that like breakdown in your head of, oh, I just don't want to do anything, like you can look at it and be like, no, I need to do this to help me for whatever that next race is.
Right. Agreed. Was there any other questions?
Those were the two.
All right. There was one more question we got to ask. Reese, what's your question?
Okay. Strictly asking for a friend. As you can see, you know, there's not too much up here, but
I was wondering why you asked this question.
planning on growing it out, okay?
Oh, okay, okay. By kettle, he's gonna have hair this length of Kaleb's. Okay, got it. Go ahead.
This is like my first reconnaissance. I just want to know what I'm in for once it gets long.
It's a pain, honestly. Like the longer it gets, the more I'm like, why is this still around? Why is this still a thing? Listen, like if it weren't for the way that I feel when I'm on the trails, when I throw on a hat and I just feel there's something about it for me that it feels like gritty. It feels like more gritty when I'm on the trails, I'm going up a mountain, I'm doing whatever, I'm falling on a rock and slamming my face off the ground. I don't know. You like get up and you're like, you like shake it off and it feels like it just feels cool. Like I don't know. Outside of that, like everyday life, I'm like, what are you doing? And then I like see pictures and I'm like, why do you still have that? But it literally is, it's just like a running thing for me. Like, I don't know, it just feels different. Or if I put like a bandana on or something, I just like, I like that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It took me like 2 years to get to this point where it's at. That's the other thing. Similar endurance mindset is like, wow, I suffered through like growing it and got it to a certain length. And now what, I just cut it off and I have to wait another 2 years if I ever wanted to do it again. That's an interesting like little mind thing there too. So yeah, it's funny. Honestly, like before I had this, I was always like high and tight. Like it was always like I always had to have it like exactly the same. And then I just decided one day that we were doing this. So kind of funny.
Beautiful.
Well, it looks great.
No,
running
thanks. Yeah.
miles in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kaleb, thank you. Thank you for flying the OMR flag out in Arizona. We appreciate it. Thanks for so candid with your training and with all these nuggets of wisdom here. We love this conversation, and I would love to have you back on to at least one more time beforehand, if not afterwards, just to see like, you know, how did it all unfold and what would you do differently next time with how much we learned with these. Hardly ever is it like, oh, I did it perfect and I wouldn't change anything else, you know?
Awesome.
Like,
Yeah. It's always great to have you on, Kaleb, and I'm excited to see how you do at Black Canyons. That's in a couple weeks, right? Or is it next weekend?
Yeah, next weekend. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Nice. Nice. So
Yeah.
good luck there. I also want to just
Thank
do a
you.
quick shout out. This weekend on Sunday, February 4th, Dr. Lisa Elsie and I, our physical therapist, are doing a pelvic floor workshop. So if anyone is interested in joining, you can check on our socials, you can check on our webpage, and you can get signed up. It's just $39 for an hour and a half of great wisdom, and you also get some free product that covers more than covers what you're paying for the workshop. So we would love to see you there. We'd love to fill the house with ladies and help people so they don't have to struggle with issues of pelvic floor health. So hopefully we can get some more people coming in. So it was a great show today, and we'll see you guys all again next week.
All right, take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Bye.